Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grounded Roots Healing. I'm Jason, and I'm going to talk about men and spirituality, and men in particular, as I am one of those. So I have direct experience in this awakening process in regards to how it relates to men in particular. Now, I understand women are going to go through the same thing, without a doubt. Like, this whole place is starting to awaken. And when I woke up, it happened very abruptly. I've described this many times before, and it was scary. And I had no one to turn to. It was a Kundalini awakening, an overnight awakening, so to speak, to full enlightenment, and then it was a lot of lessons, which made me feel insane for a while, until I started to realize that there are a lot of other people going through exactly the same thing, and there just wasn't much resources. And, it is getting better, but very slowly. Over a year ago, when this happened to me, I had to really seek out any other men that had gone through this. Now, there's obviously online is helpful. You can communicate with people on the other side of the world seamlessly, and find things. So I managed early on during my awakening process to find a men's circle, an online one, which unfortunately for me, it wasn't. So the spiritual individual in charge of this had quite a spiritual ego, and I could pick up on it right away. And I don't know if he felt threatened by my spirituality or whatever it was. I have no idea, but I just didn't feel welcome in that space. Now, this group had been providing some very valuable service for the people who were going to it. So I have no problems with the group existing, and it just wasn't going to work for me. So then I ended up going to a men's retreat, which was rather costly. I mean, it was an extremely good investment for myself, without a doubt. However, it's not going to be accessible to everybody. And that's unfortunate, because we all need it. Now, why am I singling out men? Well, like I said, I'm a man, so I understand the awakening process from that perspective better than most. And I understand why I had such a hard time. So I went through that men's retreat. That helped a tremendous amount. I met a handful, and I do mean a handful, of other men that were going through something similar to what I was going through. And to that point, most of those men didn't even want to talk about it. Not in detail anyway. It was still too raw for them. And so where are the resources, I've also said this before, that I'm clairvoyant. And I know that we're going to be going through an awakening process as a culture. Not just a culture, a planet. And that means half of the planet, it being men, are going to go through this with no resources. Now, it's not a lot better for women, but it is better. When I go to, which I do quite often, I go to Reiki, sound baths, breath work. If I were to go to yoga, which might be a little bit more men at that, it would generally be mostly women. there's often one other man there. Not often, but sometimes one other man there. So it's going to be a monumental task to walk us through this as we start to awaken as men. Where do you go? And we're not real good at that in the first place. For example, when I woke up, I had complete clarity to begin with, and then that went away. And I had no one but Spirit to ask what to do. And all of these emotions had started to come up. And then I basically had to figure out how to process these and heal myself bit by bit by bit over the last year. So, when we're born, there's no difference between a man and a woman as far as what is required emotionally from our parents. You don't differentiate between a boy baby and a girl baby. You don't treat them differently. Now, at some point during the rearing process, I know when my point was, and you'll all have to go back and look and see what your point was. It doesn't become acceptable anymore to express your feelings. And that varies based on whichever family you've been born into. But for me, it was probably about 5 years old. After that, they start influencing you before that, obviously. This is social conditioning. It's just society in general does that. But in each family, there's varying degrees of how severe that repression is of those emotions. And in my case, emotions were not expressed whatsoever from men. Not at all. Okay. So, the women had their own challenges. It was no easy ride for the women in my family, but they were different. And the only things that I can speak to are the things that I understand. So from my perspective, the men just shut off. They were shut off emotionally, completely damaged, incapable, and had no idea what to do. All right, so that's not an uncommon thing. I'm sure many of the men listening to this will have had a similar experience. The severity of the punishment for showing emotions, that's probably varies quite a bit as well. So I've said this before, my father, well, irregardless, there's so many factors, but my father has schizophrenia, and which gives him, I think it has a very strong effect on his ability to show emotions. He's also likely autistic, much like myself, with Asperger's, which has been known to inhibit, let's say, your ability to show emotions. You tend to be hypersensitive and feel emotions very, very strongly, but showing them in the proper way is the trick. Then you're born into a family or a community that very macho and hardworking blue-collar type people, and that's it. So you don't get the proper socialization, let's say, the proper knowledge on how to properly express these emotions. I said proper 3 times, I think. So how do you deal with this? Now, the first law of thermodynamics says energy is neither created nor destroyed. And I've said this before as well. We are composed entirely of energy. Our physical bodies, are energy, but let's treat them as if they are matter for the time being. There's the emotional pain body, as Eckhart Tolle calls it, and then there is our conscious mind, which is energy, pure, it's all energy. So this emotional pain body, whenever you get hurt and you feel like you want to express, say you wanted to cry as a boy, 10 years old, you're not allowed anymore because that's not allowed. That's an energy. It's a type of energy, and it's supposed to be processed by the body as well as the mind, your mind-body complex. You're supposed to process it in the time that it happens. You're not a less emotional being than a woman is. You feel all the same emotions, exactly. You just don't process them. So a lot of women don't process them when they do other things, but what men do is bottle it up. That's why they call it bottling up, because it keeps getting pushed inside, held in. And there's another way. Why do you think the language points to us holding this in? Because you're literally holding that energy in. Your body wants to express this energy, and it's going to be through an emotion, whether you like it or not. And if you don't like it and you hold it back, it gets held on to. Okay. So now we've bottled up all this energy. And in my case, it's been going on 40 plus years of not being allowed to let this out. You might let it out when you're by yourself, or you might let it out inappropriately. You might be feeling sad, but it comes out as anger, because that's a more acceptable emotion for a man to feel or express, which, as you can imagine, is less effective if you're trying to force the energy out in a way that it's not intended to. Bloody hell, why can't we just feel our emotions, Okay, so we bottled all this up, and we're already these ticking time bombs, these kegs of explosive energy that are ready to blow at any minute. And there are literally tens and hundreds of millions, if not billions, of us that are going to have to get all this out. Remember, energy is neither created nor destroyed. This energy has to be processed. And as soon as you start the awakening process, it starts coming out. It starts coming out in ways that you can't control anymore. You cannot bottle it up anymore. So in my particular case, I used alcohol and marijuana to pour it on top of that, all that emotional bottled up stuff. And I held it in, and I held it in, and I held it in, and I held it in. And it built pressure, and I was becoming more and more miserable. And also, when you hold that energy in, it has a negative effect on your physical health. This anger and pain, and it's going to come out in some way. And it will come out as physical sickness. If you don't do what the body wants you to do, it's going to express it in some way. Is it cancer? Is it heart disease? Is it racking physical body pains to make you stop? And the entire time, all the body's doing is crying out for you to let this out. So, God, when you start letting this out, I was an absolute mess. I was. That men's retreat, I was a sobbing mess for 3 days. Once I let the cork off, that was the first time that I ever expressed my feelings around men and been vulnerable to do that. I spoke a little bit, I let a lot of it out with my wife, but she could only handle so much. And then when I pulled the cork out at that men's retreat, it just started coming. And I couldn't put the cork back in. It just had to be dealt with. And that's what this entire past year has been. You're learning how different methods to process all of this old energy and to rewire all these old behavioral patterns that we learned only to suppress emotions. Now, if we had just been allowed to be humans and cry when we felt like crying, this wouldn't be a problem. And I know the next generation, this won't be a problem. You know, society's going to look very different. This isn't going to be the way it is. The divine masculine being cries. He cries when he feels like crying. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's absolutely insane to suppress that. What are we doing? So, okay. So, what do we do here? Now, I've gotten a request from a friend to host a men's circle. I don't know much of the details about it. Locally, and just a safe place where people can talk and get stuff off their chest. And I know there are places like AA and other things, but there absolutely needs to be some sort of system for like a AA for awakening men, where you have someone who knows what you're going through, has been through it, and can sit there and be a shoulder to cry on if necessary. Or at the very least, a unjudgmental listening ear. And the more I think about this, the more I see how vitally important this is going to be in the next few years. It's critical. You know, women need their own things as well. There's no doubt. There still aren't a lot of things, but I feel their emotions they'd be more accustomed to actually feeling emotions, a lot of them, not all of them, I'm generalizing, and crying. You know, I've seen women crying before, but I've never seen my father cry. And you know, I'm not sure how to expand this, and it's a discouraging thing to think about in a way, because it's who, you know. I'm going to do my part if I can here and try to be there for anyone locally and anyone online, if for that matter. If you have these thoughts and these emotions and you don't know what to do with them, I can help you. I can absolutely help you. I understand a lot of this. I've been, you know, I've healed most of this. I know there's still a lot left, but I at least am not crying every single day out of sadness. You know, if I do cry now, it's usually out of the sheer beauty of things or joy. And that is a huge improvement out of where I was when I first awakened. And I started this journey, 12 long months ago. My stomach. And 12 long months ago, but in reality, it's been a lot longer than that. I just didn't know what was happening. So, I think I'll leave it there. Like I always say, I hope this video finds you well. I love you all, and we'll see you tomorrow.